Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we are taking a spectacular 600-year road trip right through the winding path of Western art history. We're going to be speeding past some of the greatest masterpieces ever created, and honestly the best part, no waiting in line at a single crowded museum. I am super excited to guide you through this because seeing how art evolves when it's mapped out right in front of you, it completely changes how you understand it. Next time you walk into a gallery, you won't just see isolated paintings. You'll see this massive unfolding rebellion. Here's our itinerary for the trip. First, the dawn of the Renaissance. 2, the High Renaissance boom. 3, Baroque to Romanticism. 4, the Impressionist rebellion. And finally, 5, Post-Impressionism and beyond.
So this brilliantly illustrates our entire path. It's a literal winding road tracking the evolution of art. We start with Giotto way up at the top and snake our way all the way down to Picasso at the bottom. By visualizing history as this continuous, connected road, we can really see how one artistic movement directly hands the baton to the next, just constantly reacting to the world around it.
Let's quickly map out our major pit stops by the specific years shown on our guide. We're starting our engines in 1300. From there, we'll hit the peak of the High Renaissance between 1490 and 1530, cruise right through the 1600s and 1700s, past that 1780 milestone, and then accelerate all the way through to our final paradigm-shifting marker in 1980. Section 1. Dawn of the Renaissance, the beginning of the path. Starting in 1300, we find Giotto. He's sitting indoors, carefully painting a haloed religious figure on a wooden panel. This is where our journey truly begins. Giotto is setting the foundation for literally everything to come. He's starting to break away from those flat, rigid styles of medieval period, and he brings this completely new sense of life, weight, and volume to his human subjects. Moving just a bit down the road into the early Renaissance, we run into 2 more pioneers expanding on that very foundation. We spot Brunelleschi proudly holding a massive architectural dome, representing some incredible leaps in engineering and mathematical perspective. And right next to him is Donatello, carefully shaping a sculpted bust. We're basically seeing art take on 3 dimensions right before our eyes. It was a radical technological leap at the time that forever changed human perspective. Section 2. The High Renaissance boom, a crowded era. Just look at the sheer concentration of genius in this one curve of the road. Between 1490 and 1530, the path is just absolutely packed with legends working simultaneously. Honestly, it's almost mathematically improbable to have this much iconic talent in one single era. You've got Leonardo da Vinci bringing the Mona Lisa to life on his easel. Right next door, Michelangelo is actively chiseling that magnificent marble statue of David. And just a few steps away from them, Raphael is crafting his sweeping fresco, The School of Athens.
But look beyond just the famous figures for a second and notice the actual environment they're working in. Check out the sheer density of apprentices and masters working side by side inside these highly structured architectural studios. See, art during this period was a collaborative, rigorous, and entirely indoor academic pursuit. You didn't just paint, you studied anatomy, chemistry, and physics, all under a master's watchful eye.
Section 3. Baroque to Romanticism, Drama and Emotion. Navigating this 1600 to 1700 stretch, the mood on our map shifts pretty dramatically. On the left, representing the Dutch Golden Age, we run into Rembrandt standing tall in his signature wide-brimmed hat, surrounded by framed portraits that really dive deep into psychological realism. On the right, Caravaggio leans in close to his canvas, utilizing deep, intense shadows, a technique known as chiaro. That technique completely defined the dramatic flair and theatrical emotion of the whole Baroque era. Cruising forward into 1780, the path begins to widen, and it actually splits in its stylistic focus. On one side, we see neoclassicism, that's beautifully represented here by a woman elegantly painting classical figures, bringing back the strict order, logic, and symmetry of antiquity. But just nearby, we see a figure seated in a chair sketching, representing the wilder, far more emotional and introspective scenes of Romanticism. This was beginning to take hold as a direct reaction against all that strict logic. Now, let's see how this builds into something completely revolutionary. Before we make our next huge turn on the map, I want you to notice a stark contrast. Everything we've seen so far, from Giotto to Rembrandt to the neoclassicists, happens inside. It's structured studio work, marble statues, formal poses. But as we look down the path to our next bend, the walls totally disappear, and we are suddenly thrust into the great outdoors. This is the exact moment art stops looking back and starts looking outward. Section 4. The Impressionist Rebellion, Leaving the Studio. So the crucial visual definition of Impressionism here is that the artists have literally left the building. Thanks to the recent invention of paint in portable metal tubes, they were no longer confined by those strict academic rules of the Renaissance studios. Instead, they're completely surrounded by nature, capturing the fleeting light on rivers and trees exactly as they experience it in the moment.
You can clearly see Monet stationed right next to a riverbed, painting the landscape live in front of him. This practice of painting in plein air, or outside, was a total rebellion against the strict indoor studio rules that governed art all the way back to the 1300s. It breathes entirely new life and light into our timeline. It prioritizes capturing a feeling over capturing a perfect replica. But as we approach the final stretch of our winding journey, we really have to stop and ask a fundamental question. How does art evolve from the highly realistic marble statues of Michelangelo and the serene landscapes of Monet into something completely unrecognizable to those earlier masters?
Section 5. Post-Impressionism and Beyond.
In this tight post-impressionism bend, the colors and shapes become intensely emotional. We see Van Gogh stationed right in front of his iconic swirling masterpiece, The Starry Night. The sky is just alive with movement. He's joined closely by Cézanne, who is intensely focused on his easel, beginning to break landscapes down into geometric shapes. He's no longer just painting what he sees, but how the mind actually processes forms, which totally paves the way for the modern era.
Finally, hitting our 180 marker at the very bottom right of the road, we reach Picasso. Look at the canvas he's working on. He is painting entirely fragmented, angular shapes and bold cubist designs. He is completely shattering those realistic three-dimensional forms that Giotto and Brunelleschi worked so hard to establish 600 years earlier. It's a total deconstruction of everything we've seen on the path so far.
Looking back up the path we've just traveled, this visual perfectly captures the grand narrative of art history. We've journeyed from strict indoor religious portraits through a massive explosion of classical realism, out into the total freedom of nature with the Impressionists, and finally arrived at the abstract, fragmented shapes of modernism. Every single artist built on or rebelled against the one standing on the road just behind them. And this is your main takeaway. Art history isn't a series of isolated geniuses. It's an ongoing, interconnected conversation. We've reached the end of our current map, but art never actually stops moving. So I'll leave you with this. Based on the incredible, rule-breaking transformations we've seen today, when you look at the digital or AI art being created right now, what do you think the next bend in the road will look like? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.